Welcome to Wadsworth History on Film, a program presented by the Wadsworth Area Historical Society and designed to record the oral history for Wadsworth for posterity. I'm Caesar Carini, your host, and our guest today is Mary Elizabeth Dispenza Haller, better known to everyone around here right now as Mary Beth Haller. Mary Beth, you haven't always been this age. You were once a little girl, is that correct?
I think so.
You were a little girl. And where were you born?
In Wadsworth.
And where on Wadsworth? In Wadsworth?
On Chestnut Street.
On Chestnut Street. And do you remember the number of the house where your parents were living at the time?
Oh yes, 225.
225 Chestnut Street.
Right.
Which of course was, now you were born here and you have a sister too, is that correct?
Right.
And who is your sister?
Concetta, Dispenza, Anselmo.
Anselmo. And she is older or younger?
Older.
She's older than you are,
Yeah.
That's right. And how much older is she?
3.5 years.
3.5 years. So that would make her, what, 26, 27?
No, she'll be 75 in
75.
December.
And you're 72 then. Where were you
Yes.
born? Tell us when you were born, what day?
On a Monday.
And what day of the year?
What day of the year?
Your birthday.
1926.
And what?
July.
July what?
July 6, 1926.
July 6, 1926.
Right.
Shortly after July 4th, the big
Right.
firecracker. Who are your parents? Who were your parents? They're probably gone, aren't they?
Yes, they're both gone. My dad's name was Rosario Dispenza. My mother's name was Concetta Loparo Dispenza.
And your mother had relatives here as well?
Oh, yes. Yes, she
And who
had.
were the relatives?
Well, she had a sister, Maria Crisafoli, who was married to Benny, and they lived next door to us for years. She had a brother, Anthony Laparo, and he was married to Frances. And she also had a brother, Charles Laparo, married to Sadie Dispenza, his sister, my father's sister.
Your father's sister. So you're double cousins there.
Yes, yes.
Now there is, there are two Charles Laparos.
There were.
There were two Charles Laparos. Now, which Charles Laparo is your family related to?
Both.
They're related to both. In other words, Chuck Laparo, who was a teacher at Brunswick,
Yes.
and his brother Philip were also cousins.
Right.
And then Charles Laparo, who is another family, is also, and that's where the double cousins come in. Is that correct?
No, Charles Laparo from Wadsworth has the sons Joe Laparo.
Right, Joe.
And I can't think of the one name.
But no, not a problem. We all have those senior moments.
Well, Charles Laparo from Wadsworth was my mother's brother, half brother, and she had a brother, Charles Laparo from Cleveland, and both brothers. Their wives was Frances from Cleveland, and Sadie was my father's sister from Wadsworth.
Frances was Chuck Laparo and Philip Laparo's mother.
Right.
That's right. We have had many questions about those interrelationships. There are the relationships, and I know that you would know how to sift those out for us. As you remember the early days on Chestnut Street, Mary Beth, what were some of your most vivid memories, and who were some of the neighbors? Who did you play with, and where did you go to school, and all those kinds of things?
Well, I went to school to Franklin School, which was a block away from us.
You started in 1932, as I remember. Is that correct?
Right.
And who was the principal at the time? Do you remember that?
Miss Treffinger.
Miss Treffinger. Do you remember her?
Indeed I do.
What about the first grade teachers in second, third, and fourth?
Miss Stauffer.
Miss Stauffer.
Was the first grade teacher. The second grade teacher was Miss Martin.
Miss Martin. That's a name that hasn't come up yet.
The third grade teacher, if I'm not mistaken, was Miss Jockey. I may be wrong with her. All I know is that she was rather gruff, but she was a good teacher. I had Mr. Daly in the 5th grade.
What was his first name? Frank?
I don't remember.
Okay.
And then the 6th grade teacher, Miss Treffinger, would fill in.
She was the teacher there. And you went there for all 6 years.
Right.
Who were your neighbors?
Well, our neighbors on the one side was my Aunt Mary and Uncle Benny Crisafoli. On the other side was Dorothy Her married name is Carwich.
Dorothy Carwich.
Her maiden name was Kostancic or something like that.
Dorothy
She
is
lived
still
with
living.
Yes, she
Her
lives.
husband is dead, however.
Right.
Bill is dead.
Dorothy lived with her grandmother right next door to us, and which home was later bought by Mr. and Mrs. James Price. And the next house up were the Smiths.
Which Smiths were these?
Violet Smith,
Violet Smith,
Dorothy, Andy, Mike, Doris, and Rosalie.
You remember all of them?
Yes.
Got them all, yes. I used to work with Violet Smith
Oh,
many, many, many years ago. This is probably 53 or 4 years ago. I used to work with her. We worked just for a little while together. And 1926 you were born. And then the tragedies in your life, your father passed on at very, very early age. And how old were you when he passed on?
22 months old.
22. So you never remember your father?
No.
And he died of
Dropsy.
dropsy. We have different names today for those kinds of diseases.
Leakage of the heart. I
Leakage of the
guess
heart
that's-
is what it was, right? A heart condition.
Right.
And your mother then was left with 2 girls.
Right.
What did this enterprising woman do?
Well, she got herself finally a job at the High Match Company. And since my Aunt Mary lived next door to us, she would take care of us while Mom was working. And then when we started going to school, my sister took care of me, saw to it that I got up in the mornings, got myself dressed, had breakfast, and off to school we went.
And you lived that way for a good long time, and it turned out very well. So Sister Connie must have done a pretty good job, and Aunt Mary must have done a pretty good job.
We did.
As you, shall we say, increased in age, and we all do that, no one goes the other direction, as you increased in age, do you remember the flavor of the South End with, shall we say, the European element coming into it at that time?
I thought it was great myself.
And what was the flavor? What was the, for instance, on your street, you had some people who were from various parts of Europe, most of whom, however, were from where?
Well, let's see, the LaPaglias lived on East Street. They were Italians, and my Aunt Mary and Uncle Benny and us. Further down a block away were my aunt and uncle, the Milchies. But the rest, I would say, the Zagavas, I don't know what you'd call them. They were foreign, but I don't know.
Probably Hungarian.
Well, around the corner for them were the Zephyrs.
They were Hungarian.
So then we had some black people, black families.
You remember who those were?
Oh yes, well the Prices, as I was growing older, they lived right next door to us.
And what were the Prices' names?
James and I think Mrs. Price's name was Elta.
And what about the kids?
They had the boy James,
Jim Price.
and I don't know if he was the one that was called Buddy. They had a son that was called Sonny, but I don't
Sonny
remember.
Price. Now they're younger than you.
Oh, no, Sonny was older,
Sonny's older?
and Buddy's older.
I thought they were younger. But they,
They could be, but I mean, I know that Sonny is gone.
yes, they're
He
gone.
died.
Yes. Good family, wonderful
Very
people.
good. And they had a daughter, Virginia, and there was another daughter, and I can't think of her name.
You know, the thing that I think was an extraordinary element of the south end of town is that all of these various ethnic groups could live together.
Yes.
And everything was so spotless, and everything was so well manicured.
They were.
And the gardens and everything else. Now, you lived on Chestnut Street, which of course is a block away from Water Street, but do you remember the big ravine that went down?
Oh, yes.
Tell us about that big ravine and what the foreign people did there.
Well, I don't know what some of the foreign people further down on Water Street, they made gardens behind their homes.
Down kind of terrace gardens.
Right.
Oh, my heavens, they're just absolutely works of art, weren't they?
Yes, and behind us, I mean, when we left our home and went down towards Water Street to get to the ravine, there was, that was sort of like a playground. And we'd jump over the ravine. went up the ravine, and then we got to the tracks. And not too far from the tracks is where my Aunt Sadie and Uncle Charles lived.
So you were very well familiar with that ravine.
Oh, yeah.
Was there ever water in the ravine?
Oh, yes.
Was there much water, though?
No.
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 The ravine probably is Holmes Brook, is it not, coming through there? Is that what it is?
That I don't think Holmes Brook. I don't know.
I could be wrong, but I thought that's what it was. But it's not. It's more than a drainage ditch. I mean, it goes. Where does it go?
Down towards Silver Creek.
That's right. Yes, it goes towards Silver Creek. Now, Mary Beth, when you went to elementary school, did you have any difficulty speaking English?
I didn't. My sister did.
She had to learn how to speak English. Is that correct?
Right.
So many of us had that problem. I didn't learn to speak English until I went to school as well. Picked it up, but it was very difficult, very, very difficult to pick up. Now, what about, tell us a little bit about Connie and the fact that she was your altar mother, as it were. She got you out of bed, made sure that you're dressed and so forth. But you were a good little girl. You probably didn't cause any troubles. Is that right?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I don't think
well,
so.
Let's hear about that then.
Although I must admit I was a tomboy. I loved to play marbles during recess. I enjoyed climbing trees, but we had chores that my mother would lay down every night before we went to bed, what she expected of us.
You did it too.
Well, we did, otherwise we got paddled, which that's a word that's a no-no nowadays.
But it worked out.
It did, it did. Yeah, Mom had this gorgeous garden that she had in the back of the house, and we had to
weed it and hoe it and everything else.
Boy,
Now,
I guess, and pick up the vegetables as they grew.
do you remember, Mary Beth, how much your mother might have made at the match shop at the time? How much hourly she might have made?
Well, it was around 35 or 50 cents an hour when she started back
In the 30s?
Yes.
And a lot of women worked at the match shop.
Oh,
did they
yes.
not? And
Oh,
what,
yeah.
what did she do at the match shop? Do you remember?
She, well, she would sit at a table and they'd dump matchsticks there, and she'd have to sort them out.
That's what she did all day
Waste
long.
packer, I guess that's what they called it then.
She did that all along. What do you remember about some of the exciting things in the South End as you were growing up? People talk about murders in the South End and all of the other kinds of things. Do you remember anything like that?
No, there wasn't anything like that as I was growing up.
As you were growing up, and you didn't really witness any of those kinds of
No,
things.
no.
Well, what about the stores in the South End, and where did you do your grocery shopping? And things
Well,
like
we
that?
would do our grocery shopping down at the Chupas on Water Street, and also up at Bueme's grocery store uptown, which is on the corner of Mills.
Mill and High. And it's, of course, it's no longer Bohemians there. But
No.
now, as you remember some of the family relationships in the South End, could you identify some major family names and to identify to whom they belonged and with the interrelationships? Could you do that for us? Even if you have to read it, it's perfectly all right.
You mean people that I don't
That
quite-
lived right there, and who they were and what their relationships to other people were.
Oh, well, there was Sam and Mary Boemi, and they're the ones that had the Boemi grocery store. And they had a daughter, Frances, and a daughter, Josephine, who married a young man that worked at the match, and I can't think of his first name, but his last name is Martin. And then there was Charlie, their son, Charlie, and he had two children, a boy and a girl. And Tony, he married an English war bride, and they had one girl. And they were related to the Boemis on Main Street. His name was Charles and Victoria Boemi. And they had quite a family. They had a son, Charles. They had a daughter named Nellie Cravens, and Teresa, which I usually call Elizabeth Lepresti, and Elvira. And they had a daughter, Margaret, and they also had a daughter, Rosemary, that passed away as I was growing up.
Now, Elvira and Elizabeth are still living.
Yes, and so is Nellie and Margaret.
And the Nellie and Margaret
And
are still
Charles.
living?
Well, they're all living.
They're all living? Okay.
Except the one that passed away.
All of them except the one who, I guess that would be true. If he passed away, he's not living, that's right. That's clever. And who else do we have there? What other kinds of relationships do we have?
Well, the Milliches, my Aunt Lillian, we always called her Lily.
And she was your father's
My father's sister. And they had a son, Joseph, and Anthony, and Concetta, and Carmela. And the two girls are both dead.
Both dead.
And Carmela was married to John Puglisi.
That's right.
And within that family, the Dispenza family, they're intertwined with the Laparos. There's our family, and then there's my Aunt Sadie, my Uncle Charles, and they had, let's see, they had Mary Noble. They have a daughter, Concetta, and we called her Lil, and her married name was Polak. And they have a daughter, Angie, and she was married to a Miskel. And Dominic was married to a Lorraine. And they all had children and grandchildren.
And they're around Wadsworth, a lot of them still
yes.
around. Do we have any other relationships there before we leave that? Because we have so much to talk about yet about Mary Beth.
Well, there was my Uncle Joe Laparo, Uncle Joe Dispenza, that lived in Wadsworth, and he and his wife, Aunt Julia, they're both gone.
Yes.
They had a son, Louis, that lived in Youngstown, and he's gone.
And a daughter, Helen.
And Helen lives in San Francisco.
And Louis is gone, though.
Yes, he
and
died.
Helen is gone.
No,
I mean, Helen is living.
Helen is
She was
living.
a nurse, wasn't she?
She was.
Yeah.
Yeah, they during the war.
Yes. Both very nice kids.
Very.
Yes, I remember them, yeah.
Very.
How about some other ones there?
Well, there's the Chupa family. That's quite a family. There's their daughter Lena,
The oldest, she's gone. She is the mother of Tony Solaro
Anthony, and John.
and John.
And then there's their daughter Nellie. She's gone. Daughter Josephine was gone when I was a child.
She died early.
There's Mary Swartz,
Who's still living
right?
in Wadsworth.
Elvira Patty,
Still living in Wadsworth.
right? And then the two boys, Biagio and Sam, and they're both
And
gone.
they're both gone. They've been dead for a long time.
Right.
What about the relationship of the community to the Chupa store? I mean, why did they go to the Chupa store particularly?
Well, it was handy. They had Italian food, and you could always charge if you would run short on fees. But it was interesting. You went there, and it wasn't just to go buy groceries. You went for a visit.
That's what I was hoping to say. It became somewhat of a meeting place for people.
Right.
And for the want of a better name, the recreation outlets for many of the foreign element were almost non-existent. I mean, it was church, go to the grocery store and do some shopping, gardening, and things like that, because they all had to work very, very hard. Well, everyone has to work hard, but they had a little bit of a disadvantage because they were probably peasants to begin with when they came here, and then they pulled themselves up. Mary Beth, let's leave the family relationships here for a couple seconds and talk about something that we need to talk about. Otherwise, we'll find ourselves at the end of the program without having given any consideration to your family, your personal family. Now, you went through a junior high school at the junior high, which, of course, is now Central Middle School.
Right.
And you probably had many of the same teachers that other people had, so we don't have to go through all of those. And you graduated in, what, 1944?
Right.
1944. What did you do right after 1944?
I went to work at the High Match Company.
Doing what? You weren't sorting matches.
Well, during my senior year, I did. I worked in the wee-wee department where
The
they
wee-wee,
had those
the
little
little ones, right.
I worked for Mr. Shank, William Shank.
Bill
I
Shank.
was his secretary.
Had a daughter, Pauline.
Right. And I worked...
Graduated in 1939.
Oh, did she? Well, I worked there for him until I got married in 51. And I stayed with him until the end of 51. And then, because I got married in 51, and I followed Russ then in the service.
Okay, now tell us about whom you married, where you met him, and all of those kinds of things.
Well, I met my husband in 1950 on a blind date.
Blind date.
Blind date.
Who fixed it up for you?
John Philippi.
John Philippi, now dead.
No,
He's still alive. That's right. No, he's still alive. His brother Louis is dead.
No.
No, Louis is still alive? Oh, great. Wonderful. Oh.
Yeah, John fixed the blind date. It was due to the Knights of Columbus were having they had a degree, and they were having a supper. And he told me that Russ would come pick me up, and we'd go to this, to the dinner.
Where was Russ from?
From Rittman.
From Rittman. Mm-hmm. Foreigner.
Yes. And I waited and I waited, and he was late because he had to work overtime at work. He worked at the PCA at that time.
Packaging Corporation of America.
Right.
Which was before that the Ohio Box Board.
Right. And he finally got there, and my mother just tickled me so. She said, excuse me, she says, "Oh my goodness, look at that car." And I said, "What's the matter with it?" She says, "It's beautiful. It's a big black car."
What kind was it, remember?
It was a black Chrysler, and when I got to it, it had red plaid upholstery. Mm-hmm. So to this day, I tell Russ that I fell in love with him because of his car.
Car with red upholstery.
Yeah.
You remember what year it was?
No, I don't remember what year it was. But we went to the dinner, and then after the dinner, we went to Akron to a movie. And we had a very good evening, and we came on home, and he said, well, he would see me, or he'd give me a call. And I thought, yeah, sure. But he did.
He called you.
He did. He did.
Man of his word.
Very, very much so, even to this day.
To this very day. If he says something, he's going to do it.
Right.
And you were married then what day?
April 28th, 1951.
1951, in Wadsworth.
In Wadsworth at Sacred Heart.
Sacred Heart Church. Mm-hmm. And what did you do then?
Well, I continued working at the match office, and for Mr. Shank. And then when I quit, I went to, we lived in Michigan, Battle Creek, Michigan. We were not on the base. And
Russ was in the service at the time.
He was in the service.
The Korean War?
Yes. And no, that was the Vietnam War, I think. Korean, yeah. Yes. So I was there from January, and then in March, he got transferred to Fort Custer in Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, gee, he said, I don't know if I can find any facilities there for us to live in. He says, maybe you better go home. And I says, no, indeed. I says, I quit my job and I came here with you, and I'm going to stay with you. So he came back to to Battle Creek and loaded up our stuff in this car, the black car.
Still had that one.
Yes. And we found an apartment in Waukegan. And we had a marvelous time. I met a wonderful couple by the name of Myron Mitchell and Peggy. And the sad thing this day is that Peggy just passed away a few months ago.
Oh.
But it was a wonderful relationship, and I enjoyed the Army.
How long were you in the? You enjoyed the Army.
I did.
You were living.
I worked on the base for a while, and then I got a job at a dealership, I was a secretary for the dealer, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a good thing for me because I learned to grow up, more so to be on my own, to have, to be able to have someone else to look after, preparing meals, which when I was living, because shortly after we got married, I lived at home, and Mom did it all.
She did all of it.
Yeah. So it was quite an experience for me.
What? How long were you in the service then with Russ?
Till September of '52.
52, September of '52. Then what happened?
Then we came back home and we lived with my mother for 12 years.
For 12 years, wow.
And then we found this home on Westgate Avenue, and we were there. We've been there since '65.
65, so 33 years. Now, what about family, children?
Well, yes, we have our oldest daughter is Michelle, and she was born in '54, and she is now married to a wonderful guy. His name is Barry Alvord, and they live in Akron, and they have 4 natural children, and they adopted 3 boys.
Oh, wonderful.
And our second daughter was born in '56. Her name is Renee, and she's married to Bill I can never pronounce his name. And she has no children. And then we have a son, Matthew, and he was born in '60. And he lived with us up until, this is '98, till April of '97. And he struck out on his own and he bought himself a condo behind the Great Oaks.
Wonderful. And what does he do?
He works for the post office.
U.S. Postal Service, right?
And then he also works during tax season from April through December with priority tax in Doylestown.
Oh my, I would hate to do that.
Oh, he loves it.
Loves taxes?
Oh, he does. He does. He's a computer buff.
And he is not married?
No.
No, he's not married.
No.
So you have 7 grandchildren, because your daughter Michelle adopted 3 and had 4 of her own.
Right.
Tell us what Russ did.
Well, Russ...
I assume that he's retired.
Oh, yes, he's retired. Legally retired, but not.
Not really. They're like the rest of us.
He worked at the Ohio Box Board, and he worked there for 45 years and retired in '89.
What was his...
he was an electrician.
Electrician. At the Ohio Box Board. Now, let's go back to the South End just for a little while. Not that it is so important, the South End, in terms of your life, but we are very much interested in some of the kinds of people who have come out of the South End. And I guess it's probably telling that we even say it that way, because a lot of people thought that the South End probably had a different balance of people and probably would not be so successful. Who are some of the successful people who came out of the South End who are very prominent today in Wadsworth? For instance, I'll just start out with one, Tony Solaro, who owns the largest pharmaceutical house in the state of Ohio.
Right. Well, he has a son and a daughter. The daughter is a doctor.
She's a physician.
Lori. And John is, as far as I could remember, he's in college, and he's in medicine also.
Right.
I think he wants to teach or something along that line. And John, which is Anthony's brother, he's a teacher of something.
He's a professor at the University of Cincinnati.
Okay, and his wife is in the medical. Now his children, I don't know what they do.
But these people were born in the South End.
Right.
Who are some of the other people?
Well, Benny Krupe's one son, Bruce, he's really up into something, but I can't tell you what. I know that when he was living, when Benny was living, he said that his son was in college, and he was doing something.
I think he's also a professor.
Is that what it is?
Almost, sir.
Let's see, who else on the south
Well,
end?
Jerry Hall was born in the South End. Sterling Sequist was born in the South End.
Oh, okay. I wasn't aware of that.
Oh, surely. We have many prominent people in Wadsworth who were born in the South End. One of the things we have is the stigma, South End,
Yeah.
and so forth. But, you know, we have had some extraordinary people come out of that area.
Yes,
Some extraordinary people. At one time, the South End probably produced more outstanding people. Let's just take, for instance, the Krupe family. Their grandchildren and children have all been extremely
Yes.
productive. One of our favorites from that family is Jerry Logadice, who
Yes.
just everyone loves him.
Yes.
And he's one of the funniest people in the world with his dry humor, and his brother, Tony. And then their relatives, you know, are in education.
Well, yes, Margata.
Yes, and then the
Bobby.
Mirgata family. Bob is a singer, and he's known nationally.
Yes,
Everyone
he
knows
is.
him,
Right.
and he's appeared in some of the finest plays or the finest musicals. Even gave a benefit concert here in Wadsworth not
That's
too long
right, he
ago.
did.
And you know, if we start naming these people, they have come out and have been extremely. And our own mayor, John Hanna,
Right.
was born in the South End.
Well, our former, well, I don't know, our former mayor, Henderson, he lives in...
John J.D. Henson lives there, right?
Yes. I really don't feel what part of town you live in should be determined, or people should...
Should not be the determining factor for
No.
what you're going to be, because everyone has an equal opportunity, and
That's
these
right.
people have, through their persistence and hard work, have actually gained. I take my hat off to anyone who has, for instance, your mother, who, well, how old would she have been when she was widowed with
33.
33 with 2 children. She could have gone on welfare,
Right,
but instead she went to work.
that's right.
And she figured out a way to take care of their two daughters, and both of them, you know, grew up to be very respectable citizens of the city of Wadsworth, or wherever they are, Connie being in Cleveland. We have a lot of those kinds of people down there. They really were, you know, I never forget that Fred Collins, probably one of the most outstanding typewriter repair people.
Yes,
Was from the South End.
right.
And Mike Motzko.
Yes.
Mike Motzko, an outstanding barber, and everyone knew him and loved him in town. And that whole Motzko family, there were just so many of them.
That's true.
The Barabasses, you know,
Yes.
they became prominent in Wadsworth and still are. You know, you could just go name one right after another, and they would all be outstanding people. Now, going back to the days that when you got out of high school, which was 1944, we were just about at the end of the Second World War.
Right.
Men were off to war and all of those other kinds of things, and you got a job down at the mat shop with Bill Simister.
No, William Shank.
I'm sorry. Bill Shank, yeah. Bill
Well,
Shank.
Mr. Sinister did work there.
He was there, but you worked directly for Bill Shank.
Right.
Who were some of the other people with whom you worked? Some of the other girls, some of the other men, and some of the other people?
Well, most of the girls that I worked with came in from Seville. Well, there was Frances Sandoz. She was Mr. Sinister's secretary. She
Right.
also worked for Mr. Young.
And then Frances went to
Hars-
Alan Hartzell.
Yes, yes,
and worked
she
there.
did. Elvira Patty.
Elvira Patty, she worked there.
In the accounting.
She was Elvira Chupa at the time.
Right. And then there was...
I've been trying to get her on the program.
Oh, you'll...
Oh, she'll be
It'll be
outstanding.
delightful.
Oh, she'll be delightful.
Yeah.
I really want to talk to her, see if we can get her on the program. One of the problems that I have is that the people that we want to come on the program are so hard to get. I worked on you for almost a year. And I worked for it takes about a year to get them on the program. So, you know, and we need all the help we can get to go out to get them. You know, the Historical Society is so pleased to present these. And we do it for one reason. It's not a finished product, as you can see. What we do here is to merely try to get the interviews with the people so that when we do write the history, which will probably start in a year or so, we start writing the history. I'm not going to write it, somebody else will write it. They will have these documents, these documentations, so that they'll have the first person accounts of what people really did. And we need to get our people before they no longer have the ability to tell us, you know.
Yeah,
what,
that's right. That's right.
And once your memories are gone, they're gone. Once you're gone, the memories are all gone. And we also have to give a real plug to WCTV because they are so patient with us and they need so much help. You know, the station is run by volunteers. They have only a couple of people who are paid, and the rest of them, the hundreds of them, are volunteers. Unfortunately, the Historical Society doesn't have too many people who can load cameras on their shoulders and do things like that, but a lot of people who watch the program certainly could. We would like to have them volunteer for WCTV. Now, going back to the match shop, who were some of the Wadsworth people? You mentioned Elvira, Patty, and Frances Sondels, and a few of the other ones. Who were some of the other people?
There was Miss Goss.
Which one?
She was the dentist's sister.
Okay, all right. Can't think of her name right now, but
she was always Miss Goss, so
yeah, well,
I don't know what her name is.
She never married, and he never
No,
married.
no, that's
the
right.
dentist. Can't think of her name right now, but I'm sure that somebody will call us tonight to tell us who it was.
And then there was Miss Young.
And which Miss Young was this?
Oh dear, she wasn't related to
Not
the Youngs.
not the ones who owned the factories,
no,
right?
No, she was a maiden lady. She was,
Did she have her brothers?
not that I can remember, she was related to, it just didn't come to me. Because I never knew her till I started working at the match. So I really don't know who her family was.
It'll pop into your mind here in a second. They just blurt it right out. We'll get it down on tape. That's what we need.
His first name was Harry. He was Elvira's boss. And they used to live on Ohio Avenue, but he's gone now. It's not Harry Bowers.
Harry Bowers, okay, yes, all right.
He was the boss there.
And what kind of a program did Mr. Bowers run, Harry Bowers?
Accounting.
He was in accounting also. They didn't do accounting with computers in those days.
Oh, no. No.
They didn't do anything with computers in those days. As a matter of fact, you had nothing but probably
your fingers and the pencil.
Fingers and pencils.
And an adding machine.
An adding machine, if you're lucky.
That's right, that's right.
And a comptometer sometimes.
Yeah.
Comptometer.
I remember those, but I wasn't in access to that. I mean, what I did was, all I had was the typewriter, because I took orders from Lois Dini. She used to be Lois Bothman.
Yes, right.
Okay, she would bring me down the bills of lading of each order that went out of the match, that would be loaded up on the boxcars and would go down to the train station, and Mr. Daniels was down there.
Which Mr. Daniels was that?
That would be Mayor Daniels' father.
Okay,
Vernon, yeah. And so I handled the bills of ladings. And if there was any problems, then I had to find out if a bill of lading was written up for this company, and to make sure where the matches were. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Oh, you probably enjoyed everything that you did.
I did. I truly did.
How long did you work the match shop?
From, let's see, I was 18 until, well, I quit for about 9 months, and then I went back till 54.
So in 1954, you were?
I was a mommy.
You were a mommy. And you were married at the time.
Yes.
Married at 51, mommy. And what did you do after that then?
I was a home.
You stayed home. For how long?
Until Matthew was, Matthew started going to school, and that was until 71.
71. And in 71, what did you do? I think that's extremely significant for our younger people.
I worked up here at the senior high. in the cafeteria,
Doing what?
dishing out food
To?
to the high school children,
Did you have
high
any-
school people.
Did you have any problem?
I didn't. I really didn't. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
You enjoyed that as well. What
Very
made you decide to go into food service after you had been a secretary and all those other kinds of things?
Well, because by being working through the school, I would be gone the time the children were in school. I wasn't so much concerned for the girls as I was with Matt.
Well, he was the youngest one.
And I would be home when he got home from school, and I also would be home through the summer.
And that was extremely important for
Very
you.
much so.
Do you remember some of the ladies or people with whom you worked at the high school?
Oh, yes. I worked with Mary Kratzer.
Mary Kratzer?
Kratzer, Kratzer.
Right. She wasn't from Wadsworth, though. was she?
Originally, no.
No.
I worked with,
Little Purdue.
yes, she was my boss. And then the boss before her, I can't think of her name right now. Isn't that terrible? It'll come to me. But I worked with Flath, Doris Flath.
Doris Blath, okay.
And I worked with, down on Bird Street. I also worked with, she was the baker, and she's now gone. She's dead, and I can't think of her name. Marion Longfield.
Longfield.
I worked with her, and I worked with Barb Kraska. She was the dishwasher.
Barb then went blind, did she not?
Yes, and she
Poor
died.
soul.
Yeah.
What a wonderful woman she was.
Very, very.
Just absolutely outstanding woman.
Yeah, she was a terrific person. And I worked with the Snyder girls, Eleanor and Mary Snyder. They weren't originally from Wadsworth, but I worked with them. And it was a good crew.
Now, what,
Dorothy Arvey.
oh, Dorothy Arvey.
Yeah, she was a Wolford.
Yeah, Dorothy Wolford, right, yes.
Right.
Dorothy Wolford, Dorothy Arvey.
Yes.
Right, okay. I forgot the question I was going to ask you, but oh, I know what it was. The high school at one time prepared all of the meals for all of the rest of the schools.
Right.
Did they continue to do that?
They did as long as I was up here. And then I transferred from up here and I went down to the junior high, and at that time, that was, gosh, I think I worked at the junior high for about 7 years. And they, the main food, the cook down there would have to prepare it, like the macaroni, cooking the hot dogs, the main dish. We did down there. We mostly did everything. Each school had to do it themselves. Now the sauce would be brought, if we had spaghetti, the sauce would be brought from up here and would be brought to the different schools.
Did you make the spaghetti sauce?
They, yes, they did.
You would make it?
No, I didn't.
Oh.
No.
You would know how though, wouldn't you?
Oh, yes.
You bet.
Oh, yeah, I know how to do it, but I mean, my gosh, that was quite an ordeal.
Oh, you bet it
they
would
had
be.
these big vats.
Big
you know.
vats, right. How long did you work at the high school?
I started in 71 and till 71, and Matt graduated in 80. I think I transferred in 79. So I was up here 8 years, and then I went down to the junior high.
At the junior high. And with whom did you work there?
Vi Bruce was my boss.
Vi Bruce. Vi Bruce. Was she from out there in, close to you, isn't she?
She lives on Bergie Street.
Oh, on Bergie Street. Okay, you had
On the
wrong
corner
family.
of Bergie and Bird.
Bergie and Bird, all right.
And I worked with Dolores Brubaker.
Wait, let's get the Bruce family here. Who is her husband?
Jack.
Jack Bruce, okay, all right. And they lived at one time on Stratford, I believe.
That I don't know.
I think that's the right family. I'll get correct.
Jack
Bruce.
Bruce is related to the Noggles.
To the Noggles. The Noggle girls, there are several of them.
Yeah, that would be that one Noggle. The only Noggle I really know is the one that was married to Ray Police.
Right. Capola.
Capitola, right.
I'm sure I'll get corrected. There was a Bruce family that lived on Stratford or Avon, one of those two. And there's a Bruce family that I thought lived in your allotment there, but I could be wrong. But I'm sure I'll get it straightened out. And that's all right. That's what, we are here to give accurate data. And if we have it wrong and somebody can correct it, that's fine. We just make a note of it, and when the historian writes it, he or she or both will have it to write. With whom else did you work there?
Well, I worked with 2 other ladies, and I can't think of their names. It's been so many years ago. It's been over 20 years. The one lady lived on West Street, and I can't think of her name, but she was a jewel. She was hard of hearing. She wore a hearing aid, and she would tell me that I was the only one that would talk to her in my natural voice. She says, people, just because you have one of those hearing aids on and people could see it, that they would have to talk louder. She says they didn't realize by talking louder it would screech.
Oh, I guess.
And she was a dear. She lived, their home is coming, if you didn't turn from Baldwin Street, if you didn't make a right or a left-hand turn.
Go right into their house in the
right
front
into her house,
yard.
and they moved though from there. And
But you don't remember her name?
I can't think of her name.
Who was the principal at the time that you were at the junior high?
Mr. Fix.
Mr. Fix at the junior high? No.
Oh, junior high.
Junior high.
Oh, when I worked there, it was the one that's there now.
Oh, really?
No, Mr. Walters and Mr. Parsons were there. Then they left, and
Ted Kramer?
Ted Kramer. And then after Ted Kramer passed away, then we had Mr. Diazzi. There was a woman, too, that was worked with...
Webb. Barbara Webb.
Yes. Okay.
Barbara Webb.
Yeah.
I had her as a student many years ago at the university.
You did?
And her husband also, Joe Webb, who was the high school principal. Had them both, as a matter of fact. The getting back to your earlier girlhood days, you're still a girl, but your earlier girlhood days, we talked about your neighbors, we talked about the people who were there interrelationships and all those other kinds of things. As you go down through Water Street and Chestnut Street and all those other streets right now, as you go down through there, what are the significant changes? I mentioned one a little while ago, and that was the fact that there was, everything was immaculately kept, everything. Yeah. I mean, the lawns and the gardens and the houses were always painted and so forth. What is your feeling of the difference in the ambiance as you go through there now?
Oh, it has changed. The homes, especially on Water Street, where my Uncle Dominic and Aunt Ann lived, the home is, it just saddens me when I go up Water Street. The La Rocca home is about the same as it was. The Rao home, where Josephine Pickler lives, that's okay, and the Krupe, but it seems like where the Puglieses lived and the Polices, those homes have deteriorated.
They're older, and
yes.
As they get older, this takes so much more to keep them going, whereas I think that 50, 60, 70 years ago, they weren't nearly so old. They were a little easier to take care of, but they did actually get out there and take care of them.
Well, that's it. I mean, the people that owned them really took pride in them.
That's right. Do you remember what a home cost in that area when your parents purchased the home?
Well, I don't think that cost any more than $2,000 or $3,000.
My parents' first home was $3,000.
Well, my mother-in-law told Russ that when he bought his black Chrysler, it costs more than the house that their first home that they bought. So I don't know whether Russ paid over $2,000 for that car back then or not.
51?
49 or 50.
49? A couple $1,000, right?
And Mom Heller said that the car cost more than their first home.
Right. Now, jumping from there to retirement. You retired,
yes.
Chuck retired. What do you do?
Well, I volunteer at the hospital as a Red Cross lady. Anyone, other than that, I really don't do too much other than be there for my family. That's about it. I love my home.
And what about Russ? He's involved with some very special kinds of things. What does he do?
Well, he also volunteers at the hospital.
Doing what?
He's a escort.
In other words, he takes people in the wheelchairs and things like that.
And he helps out in the snack bar. Wherever help is needed in the gift shop, he's there.
The volunteers there don't get a penny.
No.
Nothing.
No,
Zero.
no.
Not even a parking place.
No.
Nothing. I mean,
no.
it's all your own, right?
That's right. But it's a wonderful feeling just to be able to help people. And by being what Russ is, he sees a lot of people that he worked with or that he's known. He also volunteers at Sacred Heart Church, and he thoroughly loves it.
And what does he do at Sacred Heart Church?
Well, if there's something broke, they call Russ.
He fixes it.
Well, he tries.
And he gets the big bucks for that too, doesn't he?
Oh, praises from God.
Praises from God.
Right.
Those are the big bucks, right?
And he's also, he was in the RCIA program.
Tell us what that is, RCIA.
That's the right of...
Christian Initiation of Adults.
Right. And he thoroughly enjoys that.
And that's an adult
For converts.
Teaching,
yes,
right.
Yes. And he also, he started up a phase of reaching out to the ill.
The ill people and
by
elderly.
taking and getting other people from the parish to take communion out to them. And he did that for 15 years, and he gave that up this year.
Oh, he's not doing it anymore?
No.
I see.
No, he does the other things. It's a commitment. It really is a commitment. And then also with the RCIA, that was a commitment. He helps. Deacon Roger is in charge of that now.
Deacon Roger Claus, Klaas,
Right.
is in charge of that program now.
Right.
And he helps him there.
And tonight is their first night of having people come in.
They're going to start another class. Mary Beth, when you were working at the mat shop, how many people do you think, and I know you may not have the exact number, how many people do you think worked at the mat shop in 1944?
Oh, golly, I would say over 2,000 people.
2,000. It was a huge operation. 3 shifts.
Yes.
And you said that your mother worked in the wee-wees, or you worked in the wee-wees?
I worked in the wee-wees.
Tell us what the wee-wees are, and tell us what the big sticks are, and tell us what the book matches are, and the caste system that seems to abide at the mat shop, or did. Of course, it's gone now, but...
Well, the machinery is just huge.
And noisy.
Very noisy. You couldn't talk to the person up. The lady is up above me, and she's pressing this machine with her feet, and that's what brings the little tiny boxes down. And I had to make sure that there were enough matches in the little tiny boxes, and then the cover would go on it. And if the matches weren't enough in that little box, then you just knocked them off, off of what they tell you, so knock them off the trowel. And down they would go, and then they would be redone by hand.
Now, how do they put the wee-wees in the boxes? By hand?
No. It's all done by machinery. The matches would be coming down off of another
conveyor.
Yeah, and they would be coming down into the little boxes, and it was really amazing.
And how many women worked down there? They were all women, were they not?
Yes.
Men were bosses. And
that's right.
No women bosses.
No.
Never.
No.
And who were some of the women you worked with at that place?
I can't tell you.
Well, actually, you didn't get to know them too well.
No,
because,
I didn't.
there was no talking because you couldn't hear anything.
No, you couldn't. You couldn't.
Now, did you ever work in Big Stick?
No.
Big Stick were the big long matches and
Right.
bigger boxes.
My mother did that on the waste, what she'd call it, on the waste packer. She would be sitting at a table, and if the boxes that weren't filled to the capacity that they were supposed to be, then she'd have to stuff the matches in there.
More matches in there.
And then put them in a box. And that's what she did all day long, 8 hours a day.
And she did it for how many years?
Oh, gracious, until, let's see, she died in 71. She retired 3 years before.
68?
Yeah,
She did it for about 38 years then,
yeah.
or more. Your father died in 30 or 28?
And, yes,
So she might have done it even for 40 years. Did every single day of the week. 8 hours a day,
8 hours a day
starting at 6:30 in the morning.
Right.
That's what she had to look forward
to
to.
3:30.
Till 3:30. That's what she had to look forward to.
Right.
Stuffing Max's, oh my heavens.
That would be so monotonous.
Oh, but she did it. Why did she do it? For one reason?
For us.
The only reason. That's the only reason.
That's
We have
right.
we have such a legacy with these older people who made every sacrifice, you know.
They did.
And now we think our sacrifice is that we have to wait for the computer to speed up or something like that. That's a horrible thing to say about ourselves, but that is true. Quickly, before we run out of time, you said that you worked on an army post when you were in the Korean War, or when your husband was in the Korean War. What did you do?
I was a typist.
And what, did they have civilians on the army post? Obviously, you were a
Oh,
civilian.
yeah, in the office.
In the offices.
Yeah,
and
we
why
were
did
all
they have
civilians.
civilians?
I couldn't tell you. I mean, evidently, there weren't any women. There weren't any women that were in the service that were on the office. We were all civilians.
They were all civilians. And what kind of work did you do? Did you work for a particular department?
No, I just worked for the army captain.
And what department was it? What kind? Was it personnel? Was it
No.
adjutant general? Or was it?
Gee whiz, I can't tell you.
And what did you type?
They would bring us sheets of papers that had names and figures on, and we had to put them in alphabetical order.
That's what you did.
That's what I did.
Now on a computer, you press a button, and in a split second they do 1,000 pages in alphabetical order with
That's
almost
right.
no time at all.
That's right.
That's what we used to do. That was why we had so many people working. Now we have so many people working because they have to take care of the computers to do all of this work. Computer will do the work of 100 people, but it takes 167 of them to keep it going. Mary Beth, as we bring our program to a close, and unfortunately we always have that, and it comes so soon, we need to share 3 or 4 things here that you have brought out that I believe are extremely important to the beneficence of the growth of Wadsworth, the history of Wadsworth. Yes, Wadsworth was settled by some pioneers who came from the Connecticut Western Reserve, or from Connecticut, and they settled in the northeastern part of Wadsworth, and then they came this direction. And the reason they settled up there was that there was water there. Why did the people settle in the south end?
I don't know, unless the homes were more reasonable at that time to buy, or closer to the factory.
That's it. That's where the factories were. And the factories were there because the railroads were there.
That's right.
And the reason that we say that the south end of town has that stigma is that they were close to railroads, and the people who were much wealthier moved away from the railroads, moved away from the factories. But how many times did your mother drive to work?
My mother never drove.
Never drove. How did she get to work?
She walked.
And how far was it?
3 blocks.
3 blocks. And that's why they worked there. These wonderful people helped to make Wadsworth what it is today because they worked hard. They were very, very good people, strong workers and all that. And that in itself was enough of a legacy.
Yes.
But the real legacy is they produced children like Mary Beth Dispenza-Haller, who has made a tremendous contribution to Wadsworth, and those of us who are here as the recipients of the Mary Beth Hallers of this world are most appreciative to you. And we want to say thank you for your part of Wadsworth history. And thank you for being on the program after trying to get you here for a year.
Thank you, Caesar.